And so now that we look at these 6,000 years, the most common form of government is a king. Nimrod, Pharaoh, Caesar, Kaiser, Sultan, Tsar, Maharaja, Genghis Khan, Julius Caesar, Attila the Hun, Stalin, Lenin, Hitler, right? You always have a pyramid structure to society. A king is a glorified gang leader. And so the default setting for human government is gangs. If you were to get rid of all police, give it a couple weeks, and you'll have gangs.
Anarchy.
And the toughest gang will try to fight the others. And
basically Mexico?
well, yeah, or inner cities. Pick any inner city. You have gangs. And if you're loyal to the gang leader, you're more equal. If you're not loyal to the gang leader, you're less equal. And if you're the enemy of the gang leader, you're dead. Right? So Islam, right? If you can, you're free to join Islam, but if you want to leave Islam, they'll kill you. So you're free to join the Bloods and the Crips and whatever gang, but if you want to leave the gang will gang up on you and kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the default setting for human government is gang leader kings. And as the centuries go on, the kingdoms get bigger because the latest military advancement, the kings can kill more people. So instead of Cain killing Abel with a rock, they can kill with a bronze weapon or an iron weapon or a big long phalanx spear that the Greeks had, Alexander the Great, or a scimitar sword that the Muslims had, or China, who invented gunpowder, right? The weapon keeps improving, but it's that same fallen nature of Cain killing Abel.
Mm-hmm.
And with technological advancements, the kings can track more people. So Augustus Caesar, 2 BC, wanted to have a worldwide tracking system called a census, a tax enrollment. If Caesar could have had access to 5G and cell phones and facial recognition software, I bet he'd been tempted to use that.
Mm.
Right? So you always have kings using the most modern weapons to control people and using technology to track people. And that's exactly what Plato talked about. Plato, in his Perfect Society, right? He talked about that you would have to have an internal passport, that you couldn't just travel, you had to get permission. In other words, and then Sir Thomas More said everybody's tracked everywhere they go. This is, in 1600 or so when he writes this. And so this idea of the default setting is gang leader kings who want to control people with weapons and track people with technology. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger until the King of England was the biggest. The sun never set on the British Empire. The British controlled India, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, British Guiana, Canada, Barbados, Bermuda, Jamaica, right in America. The King of England was a globalist. He was a one world government guy with him at the top. America's founders had the chance to break away and flip it and make the people the king. So the word citizen is Greek. It means co-ruler, co-sovereign, co-king. So kings have subjects who are subjected to their will. Republics have citizens. And the word citizen means a co-ruler. And so when we pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, we're basically pledging allegiance to we the people being in charge of ourselves. It's a bottom-up form of government versus a top-down form of government. So America is an experiment of a polarity change in the flow of power. Instead of pharaohs and Caesars and Kaisers and Khans and sultans and czars ruling top-down, it's bottom-up, we the people. And several ingredients were necessary for America to get this chance. One is a 3,000-mile ocean. 2, Europe was the chessboard. And kings would fight over little borders. America, we didn't have gold like Mexico and Inca Peru. What did America have? Beaver skins,
land,
tobacco, dried fish. I mean, they really weren't money makers. And the first colony of Virginia, Jamestown, went bankrupt. When one winter, 500 people died in Jamestown, Virginia. Sir Walter Raleigh was a rich guy, and he put up the money to found a Roanoke colony in Virginia, and it went bankrupt. And the people left and went off to live with the Indians. So America was this afterthought. So Europe was the chessboard, and the King of England was like, just stay out of my hair. Just don't cost me any money. Mm-hmm. Just do whatever you want in America for a century. And the people got to rule themselves, and they had training wheels like a bicycle, and they got this chance of ruling themselves, and it worked. And then you look at another ingredient was New England. Now, Virginia was a king-run colony, but New England, which is Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island, New England was founded by Puritans. And then Pilgrims and Baptists and Presbyterians and Quakers, and then New York by the Dutch Reformed. And they followed Calvin, called Calvinists, from Switzerland and France. And Calvin studied the Bible, but what part of the Bible? The first 400 years out of Egypt before King Saul. So king is the norm, but there's an anomaly. There's this one nation that stands out unique, ancient Israel, before King Saul. So around 1400 BC.
With judges.
Right. So around 1400 BC, you have millions of Israelites come out of Egypt. They come into the promised land, and for 4 centuries, there's no king. They're ruled by the law. The priests teach them the law, and they're taught 3 things. 1, God is watching you all the time. God wants you to be fair, and God's going to hold you accountable in the future. So you're about to steal something, nobody's around, and then you think, God's watching me. He wants me to be fair. He's going to hold me accountable in the future. Maybe I should hesitate stealing. And it creates a tiny thing in your head called a conscience. If everybody in the country believes this, you can maintain order with no king who rules through fear. And it worked until the priests went woke and they stopped teaching the law. The high priest, Eli, his own sons were sleeping with women in the very tent where the Ark of the Covenant is. Right? Another story in the book of Judges, a Levite in the house of a guy named Micah with a silver graven image. And the tribe of Dan comes along and steals the graven image and then tells this Levite, come along with us. You can be a priest to our whole tribe with this graven image. And you're like, isn't it one of the commandments? You're not supposed to have graven images, and here's a Levite with one? And then the terrible story at the end of the book of Judges where there's a Levite with a concubine. The law says the Levite is to marry a virgin of his own tribe. Here he is with the woman he's not even married to. He's not following the law. And they're traveling, and their house gets surrounded by sodomites. Something about that behavior that appears at the last stages of a people ruling themselves. This casting off of self-restraint, no borders, no guidelines, just raw passion. And the poor concubine gets raped to death. And then all the people go to Samuel the prophet, and they say, this self-government system is no longer working. The priests aren't teaching the law. Nobody's following it. Nobody fears God anymore. And we want to be like the other countries. We want a king. And Samuel cries, and the Lord tells Samuel, they did not reject you. They rejected me. And then they get a King Saul, and they flip from a bottom-up form of government, boom, to a top-down form of government with Saul. And what does Saul do? He is pouting that his son Jonathan became friends with David. And he turns to his soldiers. And he says, all you soldiers know about this, and none of you are helping me. And one soldier, Doeg the Edomite, says, King, I'm your friend. I saw David go to this town, and the priests there gave him some bread and the sword of Goliath that was stored there. Saul says, tell the priest to come here. The priests show up. He turns to his soldiers, and he says, kill them all. And the soldiers hesitate. And Doeg the Edomite goes out there and kills them all, about 70 of the priests. What just happened? The soldiers were operating under the old system, where every individual is accountable to God to follow the law, and the law says you need 2 or more witnesses before you condemn somebody to death. There's only one witness, this Doeg guy, so the soldiers are hesitating. They still have a conscience. They're like, oh, King, you're telling me to kill him, but I'm accountable to God, and God says there's going to be 2 of it. There's only one. They're hesitating. They have a conscience. Doeg says, King, I'm going to surrender my conscience to you. You tell me to kill, I'll kill. Tell me to kill the baby in the womb, I'll kill it. Tell me there's no more male and female. Tell me kids can be furries. Tell me I'm just a bunch of bush. You blow the trumpet, I'll bow to your statue. Right? The government always wants to get between you and God. Dictator kings always want to get between you. Nebuchadnezzar, right? I blow the trumpet, you bow. kings of England, right? Sir Thomas More, if you don't switch, I'm going to get you killed, right? And so what happened was in America, you had people fleeing from these countries in Europe. And so they wanted religious freedom. So Virginia was founded by Anglicans. Massachusetts was founded by Puritans. Rhode Island was founded by Baptists. Connecticut and New Hampshire were founded by Congregationalists. New York was founded by Dutch Reformed. Delaware and New Jersey were founded by Swedish Lutherans. Gustav Adolphus of Sweden was very powerful, and he wanted to have a new Sweden. And at the time, Sweden controlled Estonia, Lithuania, parts of Poland, parts of Russia. And so there you were, there were Lithuanians helping to found Delaware and New Jersey, right? They came over in boats, they had colonies, and they lasted for a couple decades until they got into a little tiff with the Dutch. And there was a Dutch Fort Christina, and one winter the Swedes took it. And they got away with it. But the next year, the Dutch sends their navy over. It doesn't just take the fort back, it takes all of New Sweden. And now it's controlled by the Dutch. But then the British conquer the Dutch, and the British take it all over, and it becomes Delaware and New Jersey. But the oldest church in Philadelphia, right there by New Jersey, is Old Swedes Church. Mm-hmm. Right? And so the colonies at first did not get along, the same way that the countries in Europe didn't get along. But then they all had to work together against the King of England. They're like, look, we don't agree with you on religion and everything, but none of us want to be Anglican, and the king's forcing us to pay taxes to this Anglican denomination, and you want to be, there were Baptists and Presbyterians and Lutherans, and one Catholic signed the Declaration, and they said, look, let's all work together against the king, and then afterwards we can all do whatever we want. But their attitude changed to, you were willing to fight and die for my freedom. I need to let you practice your faith. And so they began to tolerate each other. So each state expanded religious tolerance at their own speeds. So Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, they were like giving they let Jews come in, right? And Massachusetts stayed a Puritan Congregationalist colony up until 1833. You could not hold office in Massachusetts unless you were a Puritan Congregationalist up until the year 1833. But each state could decide. But their one fear was the new federal government might pick one denomination and make it the national, which is what every other country in the world did. And that was their only frame of reference, that the big government is going to pick one denomination, right? And so they wanted to have a First Amendment to tie the federal government's hands so religion would stay under the state's jurisdiction so they could do whatever they wanted. Anyway. But I know I've wandered all around.
No, I love it. I learned so much. So right now in America, we don't have from top to the bottom, right? Because we have elections. You have elections. I'm not the citizen of the US. So Trump is now the president. But would you say that right now the riots and the uprising of a company called Palantir may do everything that is going to bring you back from top to bottom with the technocracy?
Yeah.
Are you fearful of that company and of that technology?
Yeah. So if I can put together a couple other history stories, you have